The medical bay of the starship Galactic Unity hummed with activity as species from across the galaxy worked together in what was supposed to be a peaceful research mission. Dr. Zara Chen moved quietly between the beds, checking on patients with the practiced efficiency that had made her one of the most respected medics in the Joint Fleet. Her human hands worked with surprising gentleness as she adjusted an IV line for a wounded Kitherian warrior, whose blue skin had turned pale from blood loss. The attack had come without warning. Pirates had ambushed their research vessel near the outer rim, and the ensuing battle had left dozens wounded across multiple species. The medical bay was now a chaotic mix of alien physiologies that challenged even the most experienced doctors. Zara had been working for 18 hours straight, moving from patient to patient with a calm that impressed her alien colleagues. "Dr. Chen," called out Nurse Vextar, a tall reptilian Sathari whose scales were normally a vibrant green, but had dulled with exhaustion. "The Altarian patient in bed 7 is showing signs of distress again." Zara nodded and made her way over to where a small, bird-like creature lay trembling on the medical table. The Altarians were known for their incredible intelligence and technological prowess, but their bodies were fragile compared to most other species. This one had taken shrapnel to the wing during the attack, and the injury was proving difficult to treat. "Easy there," Zara said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that transcended species barriers. She pulled up the patient's chart on her tablet, studying the complex physiology data. Altarian bone structure was completely different from anything she had trained on in medical school. Yet somehow she seemed to understand exactly what needed to be done. The Altarian's large black eyes fixed on her face as she worked. You know our anatomy," it whispered in surprise.
"How is this possible?"
"Even our own doctors struggle with wing reconstruction." Zara paused for just a moment, her hand steady as she continued the delicate procedure. "I've had good teachers," she said simply, though something flickered in her eyes that suggested there was more to the story. Commander Thane, a massive Ursine warrior who stood nearly 8 feet tall, had been watching Zara work for the past few hours. His species prided themselves on being the galaxy's finest warriors, but even he was impressed by the human doctor's performance under pressure. She moved with a precision that spoke of training far beyond what most medical professionals possessed. "Remarkable," he rumbled to his aide, "Lieutenant Kress. The human works on species she should have no knowledge of, yet she succeeds where others might fail." Lieutenant Kress, a young Zolonian with purple skin and 3 arms, nodded in agreement. "She treated my plasma burns earlier. The technique she used, I've never seen anything like it. It was almost surgical in its precision, but she made it look effortless." As if sensing their conversation, Zara looked up from her patient and caught Commander Thane's eye. For a brief moment, something passed between them, a recognition that this was no ordinary doctor. Thane had seen enough combat medics in his time to know the difference between someone who had learned medicine in a classroom and someone who had learned it under fire. The medical bay doors suddenly burst open, and 2 security officers rushed in carrying a wounded human on a stretcher. The man was unconscious, his uniform torn and bloodied, but Zara recognized him immediately. Petty Officer Marcus Webb, one of the few other humans on the ship. She had seen him around the vessel but never really talked to him beyond professional pleasantries. "Multiple gunshot wounds," one of the security officers reported breathlessly. He was trying to help civilians escape when the pirates cornered him. "Took 3 plasma bolts before backup arrived." Zara's demeanor shifted instantly. Her movements became even more focused, more intense. She began barking orders to the nursing staff with an authority that surprised everyone in the room. "I need plasma stabilizers, combat gauze, and a neural stimulator now." As she worked on the wounded human, her techniques became noticeably different. Where she had been gentle and methodical with the alien patients, she now moved with the swift, decisive actions of someone trained for battlefield medicine. Her hands seemed to know exactly where to apply pressure, how to stop bleeding that should have been fatal, and how to stabilize injuries that would have killed most people. The other medical staff watched in amazement as she performed what could only be described as a miracle. Within minutes, she had stabilized wounds that should have taken hours to treat. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, finding entry and exit wounds with an accuracy that spoke of extensive trauma experience. "Where did you learn to do that?" Dr. Hesira, the ship's chief medical officer and a highly respected Valorian physician, asked as she watched Zara work. Those are not standard medical procedures. Zara didn't look up from her patient as she responded. Sometimes you have to improvise, she said. But her voice carried a weight that suggested years of experience in situations where improvisation meant the difference between life and death. As she finished stabilizing Marcus, Zara finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She looked around the medical bay and noticed that conversations had died down. Every member of the medical staff was staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright amazement. "Dr. Chen," Commander Thane said, stepping forward. His massive frame cast a shadow over the medical table, but his voice was respectful. "That was extraordinary. Your techniques are unlike anything I've seen in conventional medicine." Zara met his gaze steadily, her dark eyes giving nothing away. "Emergency medicine requires adaptability," she said simply. "Every patient is different, every situation unique." But even as she spoke, she could feel the weight of their stares. She had been careful to blend in, to appear as just another doctor serving on a peaceful research vessel. Now she realized she might have revealed more than she intended. The way she had handled the trauma, the speed of her response, the techniques she had used, they all pointed to training far beyond what any civilian doctor would possess. As the medical bay gradually returned to its normal rhythm, Zara continued her rounds. But she could feel eyes following her every movement, could sense the questions that were beginning to form in the minds of her colleagues. She had spent months carefully crafting her cover identity, but in a moment of crisis, her true training had shown through. The wounded human, Marcus, began to stir on the medical table, his eyes fluttering open to meet hers. For a brief second, something passed between them, a recognition that went beyond their shared humanity. Then he closed his eyes again, but not before Zara caught the slight nod he gave her. She realized then that her secret might not be as safe as she had thought. 3 days had passed since the pirate attack, and the medical bay had finally returned to some semblance of normalcy. Most of the wounded had recovered enough to return to their duties, though a few still required observation. Zara had barely left the medical wing during this time, throwing herself into her work with an intensity that hadn't gone unnoticed by her colleagues. Marcus had made a remarkable recovery, something that had surprised even Dr. Hasira. Plasma bolt wounds were notoriously difficult to heal, often leaving permanent damage to tissue and organs. Yet Marcus was already sitting up in bed, his vital signs strong and his wounds healing at an accelerated rate that defied conventional medical understanding. "It's impossible," Dr. Hasira muttered to herself as she reviewed Marcus's charts for the 3rd time that morning. The Valorian physician had over 40 years of experience treating combat wounds across dozens of species, but she had never seen recovery rates like this. "These readings must be wrong." Zara overheard the comment as she approached with Marcus's medication. "Human physiology can be quite resilient," she said casually, though she avoided making direct eye contact with the chief medical officer. "Sometimes the body responds better to treatment than we expect." Dr. Hasira's large compound eyes fixed on Zara with an intensity that made the human doctor uncomfortable. "Dr. Chen, I've been practicing medicine longer than most species live. I've never seen tissue regeneration like this, especially not from plasma wounds. What exactly did you do to treat him?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zara could feel other staff members beginning to pay attention to their conversation. She had hoped that the chaos of the emergency would mask her unconventional methods. But Dr. Hasira was too experienced and too observant to let things slide. "I followed standard trauma protocols," Zara replied, her voice steady. "Combat gauze to control bleeding, plasma stabilizers to prevent shock, neural stimulation to maintain consciousness. Nothing outside normal procedures." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. The techniques she had used were far from standard. The pressure points she had targeted, the specific way she had applied the gauze, the timing of the neural stimulation, all of it spoke to training that went far beyond civilian medical education. Commander Thane, who had been visiting the wounded from his unit, paused in his conversation with a recovering Ursine soldier. His keen warrior's instincts had been picking up on the undercurrents of tension in the medical bay for days now. Something about the human doctor didn't add up, and his military training made him naturally suspicious of inconsistencies. "Dr. Chen," he said, approaching the group around Marcus's bed, "I've been meaning to thank you personally for your work during the crisis. Your response time was impressive. It reminded me of field medics I've worked with in combat zones. Zara felt a chill run down her spine at his words. Commander Thane wasn't just making casual conversation. He was fishing for information. I appreciate that, Commander, she said carefully. Emergency situations tend to bring out the best in medical professionals. Indeed, Thane replied, his eyes never leaving her face. Though I have to say, your technique was quite specialized. The way you handled multiple trauma cases simultaneously, the precision of your movements under pressure, it spoke to extensive field experience. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside. Captain Vorash, the ship's Keltaran commanding officer, entered the medical bay with his usual authoritative stride. His reptilian features were set in a serious expression that suggested this wasn't a routine visit. Dr. Chen, he said without preamble, I need to speak with you privately. My ready room in 10 minutes. The medical bay fell silent. Captain Vorash rarely involved himself in medical matters unless something significant was happening. Zara felt every eye in the room turned toward her, and she knew that whatever careful balance she had maintained was about to be disrupted. Of course. Captain, she replied, her voice betraying none of the anxiety she felt. I'll just finish with my current patient. As the captain left, the atmosphere in the medical bay grew thick with tension. Dr. Hasira exchanged meaningful glances with Commander Thane, while the nursing staff tried to look busy while obviously straining to overhear any conversation. Marcus, who had been lying quietly during the exchange, suddenly spoke up. Doctor, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Whatever happens, remember that some secrets are meant to be kept. The comment was cryptic enough that most people in the room dismissed it as the rambling of a recovering patient. But Zara caught the underlying meaning. Marcus knew something about her background, something that could complicate her situation even further. She finished her rounds quickly, her mind racing as she tried to prepare for whatever Captain Vorash wanted to discuss. She had been careful to maintain her cover for months, blending in with the diverse crew of the research vessel. Her credentials as Dr. Zara Chen, a trauma specialist from Earth's Medical Corps, had been impeccable. But credentials could only take someone so far when their actions spoke louder than their paperwork. As she made her way to the captain's ready room, Zara reflected on the path that had brought her here. The Galactic Unity was supposed to be a safe assignment, a chance to use her medical skills in a peaceful environment while staying off the radar of certain organizations that would very much like to find her. The research mission had seemed perfect, low profile, minimal contact with military or intelligence networks, and a chance to help people without the constant threat of discovery. The pirate attack had changed everything. In the heat of the moment, her training had taken over, and she had responded with the instincts and skills of someone with far more combat experience than any civilian doctor should possess. She had saved lives, but in doing so, she might have exposed herself to exactly the kind of scrutiny she had been trying to avoid. The door to Captain Vorash's ready room slid open at her approach. The Keltaran commander was seated behind his desk, his scaled hands folded in front of him. His yellow eyes, which missed nothing, tracked her movement as she entered the room. Dr. Chen, he said, gesturing for her to take a seat. Please make yourself comfortable. We have much to discuss. Zara sat down, maintaining her composure despite the growing certainty that her carefully constructed cover was about to be challenged. Captain Vorash was known throughout the fleet as a fair but thorough commander, someone who valued truth above all else. I've been reviewing the reports from the pirate attack, Vorash began, his voice measured and careful. Your performance during the crisis was exemplary. Lives were saved that otherwise would have been lost. However, several of my senior staff have raised questions about your methodology. Here it comes, Zara thought. She kept her expression neutral as she waited for the captain to continue. Dr. Hasira tells me that your techniques were highly unconventional, far beyond what she would expect from a civilian trauma specialist. Commander Thane observed response patterns consistent with military field medicine training. And the results you achieved? He paused, consulting a tablet in front of him. Well, they speak for themselves. Zara remained silent, knowing that anything she said at this point could only make her situation worse. Captain Vorash studied her for a long moment before continuing. I'm not accusing you of anything, Doctor, but I'm curious about your background. Your credentials are impeccable, but they tell only part of the story. I think it's time we discussed the rest. Captain Vorash leaned back in his chair, his reptilian features thoughtful as he studied Zara's carefully controlled expression. The silence stretched between them for several long moments before he spoke again. Doctor, in my 30 years of service, I've learned to read people. It's a survival skill in command positions. Right now, you're sitting perfectly still. Your breathing is controlled and your heart rate hasn't increased despite the stress of this situation. That kind of composure under pressure isn't something they teach in medical school. Zara finally broke her silence. Captain, with respect, I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm a doctor who did her job during a crisis. If my methods were unconventional, it's because emergency situations require adaptive thinking. Adaptive thinking, Vorash repeated slowly. Is that what you call performing field surgery techniques that take most combat medics years to master? Or stabilizing multiple trauma patients simultaneously while under potential hostile fire? He leaned forward. Dr. Chen, I've checked your official records. They show a brilliant medical career, but they're also remarkably clean. No gaps, no irregularities, no periods that can't be accounted for. The observation hung in the air like an accusation. Zara knew that overly perfect records were often a red flag to experienced officers. Real lives were messy, with gaps and inconsistencies that revealed the human story beneath the official documentation. I've been fortunate in my career path, Zara said carefully. Clear goals, focused education, consistent advancement. Some people's lives are more straightforward than others. Before Captain Vorash could respond, his communication device chimed. The message that appeared on his screen made his expression grow even more serious. It seems our conversation will have to wait. We've received a priority transmission from Starfleet Command. There's been another attack. Zara felt her heart rate increase for the first time since entering the room. Another pirate attack? Not pirates, Vorash said grimly. The hegemony has struck a civilian transport near the Centauri system. 300 passengers, mostly families relocating to the outer colonies. The ship was heavily damaged and is drifting without power. We're the nearest vessel capable of providing medical assistance. The hegemony. The name sent a chill through Zara that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. The militant faction had been growing bolder in recent months, attacking civilian targets with increasing frequency. Their goal was simple: prove that the various species of the galaxy couldn't coexist peacefully, and that only strength and separation could ensure survival. How long until we reach them? Zara asked, her mind already shifting into crisis mode. 18 hours at maximum warp, Vorash replied. Doctor, I need to know, are you prepared for what we might find? The hegemony doesn't just attack ships. They make examples of them. This could be worse than anything we saw during the pirate encounter. Zara met his gaze steadily. I'm prepared, Captain. Whatever we find, I'll do everything in my power to save as many lives as possible. Something in her tone made Vorash pause. There was a steel in her voice that went beyond medical determination. It was the voice of someone who had seen the worst that people could do to each other, and had made peace with the necessity of standing against it. Very well. Prepare the medical bay for mass casualties. I'll have Commander Thane work with you on triage protocols. He stood up, indicating that their conversation was postponed, not concluded. Doctor, when this crisis is over, we will finish our discussion. Zara nodded and left the ready room, her mind already racing ahead to the preparations needed for what was coming. As she walked through the corridors of the Galactic Unity, she could feel the change in atmosphere as news of the hegemony attack spread through the crew. Fear and determination mingled in equal measure as beings from dozens of different species prepared to risk their lives to save strangers. When she reached the medical bay, she found it already buzzing with activity. Dr. Hess Ira was reviewing casualty protocols with the nursing staff, while Commander Thane was setting up additional medical stations. The Ursine warrior looked up as she entered. Dr. Chen, he said, I've taken the liberty of implementing emergency triage procedures. Based on hegemony attack patterns, we should prepare for severe trauma cases, possible biological contamination, and psychological casualties. Zara was impressed by his thoroughness. Good thinking, Commander. We should also prepare for the possibility of survivors who've been in space without life support for extended periods. Hypothermia, decompression injuries, oxygen deprivation. As they worked together to prepare the medical bay, Zara noticed that Commander Thane was watching her closely. His experience in combat zones had given him insights into human behavior under stress, and he was clearly seeing things in her responses that reinforced his suspicions about her background. "Doctor," he said during a brief lull in the preparations, "you seem to have extensive knowledge of battlefield injuries. Have you treated hegemony attack survivors before?" The question was casual, but Zara could hear the underlying probe. "I've read the reports," she said. "Medical journals publish case studies of unusual trauma patterns. It helps doctors prepare for situations they might not otherwise encounter." "Of course," Thane replied, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Marcus, who had checked himself out of patient care despite Dr. Hesira's protests. He was still moving carefully, but his recovery remained remarkably advanced. "I want to help," he said simply. "I have field medical training. Nothing fancy, but I can assist with basic triage and patient transport." Dr. Hesira started to object, but Zara cut her off. "We'll need all the help we can get. Marcus, you can work with Nurse Vextar on the preliminary assessments." As Marcus moved to his assigned station, he passed close enough to Zara to whisper, "They're getting suspicious. Be careful." The warning was subtle enough that only Zara caught it, but it confirmed her growing concern that her cover was becoming increasingly fragile. The competence she had displayed during the pirate attack had drawn attention, and now another crisis was forcing her to make the same choice: maintain her cover and potentially let people die, or use her full abilities and risk exposure. Captain Vorash's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We are approaching the damaged transport vessel. Early scans indicate multiple hull breaches and possible survivors. All medical personnel report to your stations. All non-essential personnel secure for emergency maneuvers." Through the medical bay's viewports, Zara could see the twisted wreckage of what had once been a passenger transport. The ship was massive, designed to carry hundreds of families to new homes in the outer colonies. Now it drifted in space like a broken toy, its hull scarred by weapons fire and its emergency lights flickering weakly in the darkness. "My God," Dr. Hesira breathed. "The damage is extensive. How could anyone survive that?" Zara studied the wreckage with eyes that had seen similar destruction before. The attack patterns were characteristic of hegemony assault tactics, precise strikes designed to disable rather than destroy immediately, maximizing suffering and terror. They would have boarded the ship, taken what they wanted, and left the survivors to die slowly in the cold of space. "There will be survivors," she said with quiet certainty. "The hegemony wants witnesses. They want stories to spread fear throughout the galaxy. They would have left enough people alive to ensure their message gets out." Commander Thane looked at her sharply. "That's a very specific assessment, Doctor. How can you be so certain of hegemony tactics?" Zara realized she had said too much, but there was no taking it back now. "Like I said, I've read the reports. Their methods are consistent across multiple attacks." But even as she spoke, she could see the doubt growing in the eyes of those around her. Her knowledge was becoming too specific, too detailed for someone whose only experience with such situations should have been academic. The ship shuddered slightly as they matched velocity with the wreckage, and Captain Vorash's voice came over the comm again. "Rescue teams, prepare for boarding operations. Medical teams, stand by for immediate casualty reception." As the first rescue shuttles launched toward the damaged transport, Zara felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. In a few hours, the medical bay would be filled with the broken and dying, and she would have to make the choice that had been haunting her since joining the crew of the Galactic Unity. How much of her true self could she reveal while still protecting the secret that had brought her here? The first wave of survivors arrived 30 minutes after the rescue shuttles launched. The medical bay doors burst open as emergency teams rushed in, carrying the wounded on anti-gravity stretchers. The scene that greeted them was worse than anyone had imagined. "Dear ancestors," whispered Nurse Vexatar, her normally vibrant scales dulling to a sickly gray at the sight. What did they do to these people? The hegemony's signature brutality was evident in every casualty. These weren't clean combat wounds or accidental injuries. They were deliberate, calculated acts of cruelty designed to cause maximum suffering. Burns that had been left untreated, wounds that had been inflicted to cause pain rather than quick death, and psychological trauma that was visible in the vacant stares of even the conscious survivors. Zara moved into action immediately, her trained eyes rapidly assessing the incoming casualties and directing them to appropriate treatment areas. But as she worked, she found herself fighting against instincts and knowledge that went far beyond her cover identity. Dr. Chen called Dr. Hesira from across the room where she was working on a young Altarian child. This patient has injuries I don't recognize. The wound patterns are unusual. Zara glanced over and immediately understood what she was seeing. The child had been tortured using specific techniques that the hegemony employed to break the will of their captives. The physical wounds were designed to heal slowly and painfully, leaving permanent reminders of the experience. Neural disruptor burns, she said without thinking. They use low power settings to cause maximum pain without killing. The wounds need to be cleaned with saline solution and treated with neural regeneration therapy. The medical bay went quiet. Dr. Hesira's compound eyes widened as she stared at Zara. How could you possibly know that? Neural disruptors are classified military weapons. Most civilian doctors have never even seen the effects, let alone know the specific treatment protocols. Zara realized her mistake immediately, but there was no taking it back. Around the room, she could see her colleagues exchanging glances filled with suspicion and growing certainty that she was not who she claimed to be. She began, but her explanation was cut off by the arrival of another wave of casualties. These were even worse than the first group, and Zara found herself facing a choice between maintaining her cover and saving lives. Commander Thane approached her station, his massive frame casting a shadow over the treatment area. Doctor, he said quietly, these wounds require expertise that most medical professionals don't possess. If you have knowledge that could save lives, now is not the time to worry about questions. His words carried a weight of understanding that surprised her. The Ursine warrior might be suspicious of her background, but he was also a soldier who understood the priority of saving lives over maintaining operational security. A new casualty was brought in, a human woman in her 30s whose injuries were so severe that Dr. Hesira shook her head in despair. There's nothing we can do. The neural damage is too extensive and her vital organs are failing. We should focus on patients we can actually save. Zara looked at the woman and saw something that the others had missed. The injury pattern was familiar, and she knew exactly what had been done and how to reverse it. But the procedures required would expose knowledge and techniques that no civilian doctor should possess. Marcus appeared at her side, having been helping with the less critical patients. Doc, he said quietly, sometimes saving lives is more important than protecting secrets. Their eyes met, and in that moment Zara understood that Marcus knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. More than that, he was giving her permission to reveal her true abilities. Clear the area around bed 12, she called out, her voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the medical bay stop what they were doing. I need neural stimulators, advanced life support, and complete silence. Dr. Hesira started to protest. Dr. Chen, that patient is beyond help. The damage is too severe for conventional treatment. I'm not using conventional treatment, Zara replied, her hands already moving with purpose as she assembled equipment that most doctors wouldn't even know how to operate. Everyone stand back. What I'm about to do requires complete concentration. As she worked, her movements took on a precision and confidence that was impossible to ignore. Her hands seemed to know exactly where to place neural stimulators, how to calibrate the life support systems, and which combination of medications would reverse the specific type of torture the woman had endured. Commander. Thane watched in fascination as she performed procedures that he had only seen in the most advanced military medical facilities. Incredible, he murmured. She's reversing neural pathway damage that should be permanent. The woman's vital signs began to stabilize, then strengthen. Color returned to her pale cheeks and her breathing became deeper and more regular. Within minutes, she was showing signs of consciousness, something that should have been impossible given the extent of her injuries. How? Dr. Hesira demanded. What did you do? Zara was too focused on her patient to respond, but her techniques had revealed enough. Every medical professional in the room could see that she was employing methods far beyond civilian medical training. The precision of her movements, the specific knowledge of torture recovery techniques, and the advanced equipment she was using all pointed to one conclusion. Captain Vorash entered the medical bay at that moment, drawn by reports of the mass casualty situation. He took in the scene with experienced eyes, the wounded survivors, the medical staff working frantically, and at the center of it all, Dr. Zara Chen performing what could only be described as a medical miracle. Status report, he demanded. 43 survivors recovered so far, Dr. Hasira reported. Severe trauma cases, torture victims, and psychological casualties. Dr. Chen has been remarkable in her treatment of the most severe cases. Vorash's eyes found Zara, who was still working over her patient but clearly aware of his presence. Doctor, your reputation for unconventional methods seems to be spreading. Before Zara could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The red alert lights bathed the medical bay in an ominous glow as Captain Vorash's communicator chirped urgently. Captain, came the voice of his first officer, we're detecting multiple ships approaching our position. They're not responding to hails, and their configuration matches hegemony assault vessels. The temperature in the medical bay seemed to drop several degrees. The hegemony had returned, probably to ensure there were no survivors left to tell the story of their attack. The Galactic Unity was a research vessel, lightly armed and not designed for combat against military ships. All hands to battle stations, Vorash ordered. Raise shields and prepare for possible combat. As the crew scrambled to prepare for the approaching threat, Zara found herself facing the moment she had been dreading. Her secret was already compromised, her cover blown by her medical expertise. Now, with hegemony ships approaching and wounded civilians depending on her skills, she would have to decide whether to continue hiding her true identity or reveal the full extent of her capabilities. Marcus caught her eye from across the room and gave her a slight nod. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't face it alone. But the question remained, was she ready to let her colleagues know that Dr. Zara Chen, civilian trauma specialist, was actually Lieutenant Commander Zara Chen, formerly of the Earth Special Forces Medical Corps, and one of the most highly trained combat medics in human space? The approaching hegemony ships would force her hand one way or another. And when they did, the crew of the Galactic Unity would discover that humanity had been keeping some very interesting secrets about their military capabilities. The battle for the survivors was about to become something much more dangerous, and Zara's carefully maintained cover was about to be tested by enemy fire. The Galactic Unity shuddered as the first hegemony weapons struck her shields. Through the medical bay's reinforced viewports, brilliant flashes of energy illuminated the darkness of space as the research vessel's defensive systems struggled against the assault from 3 heavily armed warships. Hull breach on Deck 7, came the report over the ship's communication system. Emergency teams respond immediately. Zara continued working on her patients even as the ship rocked around her, but she could see the fear in her colleagues' eyes. The medical staff were civilians, trained to heal rather than fight, and the reality of being under direct enemy fire was testing their composure. Dr. Chen, Dr. Hasira called out, her voice strained as she struggled to maintain her balance while treating a wounded Catherian. How are we supposed to work under these conditions? Before Zara could answer, the medical bay doors opened and Commander Thane entered with a group of security personnel. His expression was grim as he approached her station. Doctor, I need to speak with you privately now. The urgency in his voice made it clear this wasn't a request. Zara glanced at her patient. The human woman she had saved was now stable and conscious, watching the exchange with alert eyes. I can't leave my patients, Zara protested. Yes, you can, Marcus said, appearing beside her. I'll monitor them. Dr. Hasira and I can handle things here for a few minutes. There was something in Marcus's tone that suggested he knew exactly why Commander Thane needed to speak with her. Reluctantly, Zara followed the Ursine warrior to a small consultation room off the main medical bay. Thane closed the door behind them and activated a privacy screen that would prevent their conversation from being overheard. We need to talk, he said without preamble. My security scan of the crew records found some interesting inconsistencies in your file. Zara felt her heart rate increase, but she kept her expression neutral. Commander, I'm not sure what you're implying, but we have wounded people who need— Lieutenant Commander Chen, Thane interrupted, using her real rank. Or should I say, former Lieutenant Commander Chen of the Earth Special Forces Medical Corps, presumed killed in action during Operation Silent Shield 3 years ago. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. Operation Silent Shield was classified at the highest levels, known only to a handful of military personnel across the galaxy. The fact that Thane knew about it meant her carefully constructed cover had completely collapsed. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but even as she spoke, she could hear the defeat in her own voice. Thane's expression softened slightly. Doctor, 3 hegemony warships are currently trying to destroy this vessel and everyone on it. They have superior firepower, better shields, and more experienced crews, but what they don't know is that they're facing a ship with one of the most highly trained combat medics in known space. Another impact shook the ship, and the lights flickered ominously. Thane continued speaking, his voice urgent. Your service record makes for interesting reading. 12 major combat operations, survivor of the Kepler Station siege, recipient of the Solar Cross for extraordinary valor under fire. Most importantly, you were the lead medic for the Joint Species Task Force that developed new battlefield medicine protocols specifically for fighting the hegemony. Zara closed her eyes, knowing that her secret was finally out. How long have you known? I suspected from the moment I saw you work during the pirate attack. Confirmed it when you identified those neural disruptor wounds. There are maybe 50 people in the entire galaxy who would recognize those injury patterns, and most of them are dead. Thane leaned forward. The question is, why is a decorated Special Forces medic hiding on a research vessel under a false identity? Before Zara could answer, Captain Vorash's voice crackled over the communication system. All senior staff to the bridge immediately. We have a situation. Thane and Zara exchanged glances. This conversation isn't over, the Ursine commander said. But right now we need your expertise to keep this ship alive. They returned to the medical bay, where the situation had deteriorated rapidly. More wounded were arriving from the damaged sections of the ship, and the medical staff was struggling to cope with both the original survivors and the new casualties from the ongoing battle. Dr. Hesira called out as soon as she saw them return. We have multiple crew members with severe plasma burns and our emergency medical systems are overloaded. I need your help with the triage decisions. Zara looked around the medical bay, taking in the chaos with eyes trained to assess battlefield situations. The wounded were scattered across every available surface. Medical equipment was running at maximum capacity, and her colleagues were beginning to show signs of stress-induced exhaustion. Marcus, she called out, I need you to coordinate patient evacuation to the secondary medical bays. Nurse Vextar set up emergency treatment stations in the cargo bay. Dr. Hesira, focus on the most critical cases. I'll handle the complex trauma. As she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command in crisis situations. The medical staff responded immediately, moving with renewed purpose as she organized their efforts with military efficiency. Commander Thane, she said, turning to the Ursine warrior, I need a security team to help move patients, and I need a direct line to the bridge. If we're going to keep these people alive while under attack, I need to know what the tactical situation is. Thane nodded approvingly. This is the real you, isn't it? The officer who held Kepler Station for 6 days against impossible odds. Zara was about to respond when the ship's communication system activated again. This time it wasn't Captain Vorash's voice that filled the medical bay, but a cold mechanical tone that made everyone freeze. Attention survivors of the transport vessel Bright Hope, the voice said. You are harboring witnesses to hegemony justice. Surrender them immediately, or your ship will be destroyed. The medical bay fell silent except for the groaning of wounded patients. The hegemony was demanding that they hand over the survivors they had rescued, the very people they were fighting to save. Captain Vorash's voice came back over the comm. This is Captain Vorash of the Galactic Unity. We are a civilian research vessel conducting humanitarian rescue operations. We will not surrender refugees under our protection. The response was immediate. The ship shook violently as concentrated weapons fire struck their shields, and alarms began blaring throughout the vessel. Emergency lights bathed the medical bay in red as the ship's defensive system struggled against the intensified assault. Shields down to 30%, came a report from the bridge. Hull breaches on multiple decks. We can't take much more of this. Zara felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling on her shoulders. These people, her patients, her colleagues, the survivors they had rescued, were all depending on decisions that would be made in the next few minutes. She could continue hiding, maintain her cover and hope someone else would find a solution, or she could step forward and use every skill she had learned in her years of military service. Marcus appeared at her side, his expression serious. Doc, they need to know who you really are. All of it. She looked around the medical bay at the faces of beings from dozens of different species, all united in their determination to save lives and protect the innocent. Dr. Hasira, working tirelessly despite her confusion about Zara's abilities. Nurse Vextar, caring for patients even as weapons fire shook the ship around them. Commander Thane, standing ready to fight despite impossible odds. "Commander," she said to Thane, her voice carrying a new note of authority. "Patch me through to the bridge." It's time Captain Vorash learned exactly who he is serving in his medical bay. As Thane activated his communicator, Zara prepared to reveal not just her real identity, but a secret that went far beyond her personal history. She was about to expose one of humanity's most closely guarded military secrets, and in doing so, give the crew of the Galactic Unity their only chance of survival against the hegemony warships. "Captain Vorash," Zara said as Thane's communicator connected her to the bridge. "This is Dr. Chen. I need to speak with you immediately about our tactical options." "Doctor, this is hardly the time for medical consultations," came Vorash's strained reply. The sound of weapons fire and shouted orders could be heard in the background. "We're fighting for our lives up here." "That's exactly why you need to listen to me," Zara said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to life or death decisions. "My name is not Dr. Zara Chen. I am Lieutenant Commander Zara Chen, formerly of the Earth Special Forces Medical Corps, and I know how to defeat these hegemony ships." The communication channel went silent for several seconds. Around the medical bay, her colleagues stared at her in shock. Dr. Hasira's compound eyes widened as the implications sank in, while Nurse Vextar's scales shifted to a deep blue of surprise. "Bridge to medical bay," Captain Vorash finally responded. "Commander Thane, escort Dr. Lieutenant Commander Chen to the bridge immediately. Everyone else maintained current positions. As they made their way through the ship's corridors, avoiding damage control teams and emergency responders, Thane couldn't contain his curiosity. "What exactly are you planning? The hegemony ships outgun us 3-1, and our shields are failing." "The hegemony thinks they know human capabilities," Zara replied as they entered a lift. "They've studied our civilian vessels, our merchant marine, even some of our regular military units. But they've never encountered a SEAL medic in a tactical situation." "SEAL?" Thane asked, unfamiliar with the term. "Sea, air, land. An old Earth designation that stuck. Special Forces units trained for impossible missions in hostile environments. What the galaxy doesn't know is that our medics receive the same combat training as our assault troops, plus advanced medical knowledge that goes far beyond treating wounds." The lift doors opened onto the bridge, where Captain Vorash was coordinating defensive operations with his crew. The Keltaran commander looked up as they entered, his yellow eyes taking in Zara's changed demeanor. "Lieutenant Commander," he said formally, "explain yourself. What capabilities are you talking about?" Zara moved to the tactical display, studying the positions of the 3 hegemony vessels. "Captain, may I?" When he nodded, she began manipulating the display with practiced ease. The hegemony ships are using standard attack formation Delta 7. They're positioning themselves to maximize overlapping fire while minimizing their exposure to return fire. "Yes," Vorash said impatiently. "We can see that. What we can't see is how this helps us." "Because they're following predictable patterns," Zara explained, highlighting specific sections of their formation. "Hegemony commanders are trained to fight conventional opponents. They've never faced an enemy that combines medical knowledge with tactical expertise." She turned to face the bridge crew, her expression serious. "Captain, I need your permission to implement something that's classified at the highest levels of human military command. It's called Operation Lifeline, and it was developed specifically for situations like this." Commander Thane stepped forward. "Captain, her service record is extraordinary. If she says she has a solution, I recommend we listen." Vorash studied Zara for a long moment. "Very well, Lieutenant Commander. What do you need?" "First, I need access to your ship's medical replicators and chemical synthesis systems. Second, I need a small team of volunteers willing to follow orders without question. And third," she paused, knowing this would be the hardest part, "I need you to trust me with the lives of everyone on this ship." Another impact shook the bridge as the hegemony ships pressed their attack. "Shields down to 15%, reported the tactical officer. "We won't survive another concentrated barrage." "Do it," Vorash ordered. Whatever you need, you have my authorization. Zara nodded and activated her communicator. Marcus, I need you to bring specific medical supplies to the bridge. Neural stimulators, combat drugs, and anything we have that can enhance human physical performance. On my way, came Marcus's immediate reply. As they waited, Zara began explaining her plan to the increasingly amazed bridge crew. The hegemony ships are vulnerable during their attack runs. Their shields have to reconfigure to channel power to their weapons, creating brief windows where their defensive systems are compromised. We know that, the tactical officer said, but our weapons aren't powerful enough to exploit those weaknesses. Our weapons aren't, Zara agreed, but their own weapons are. She highlighted the lead hegemony ship on the display. I'm going to board that vessel and turn their weapons against the other two ships. The bridge fell silent. Captain Vorash's expression shifted from surprise to concern. Lieutenant Commander, that's suicide. Even if we could get you aboard, you'd be facing an entire crew of hegemony soldiers. Not if I do it right, Zara said calmly. SEALs are trained for solo infiltration missions, and the medical knowledge I possess includes some very specific expertise in alien physiologies, including hegemony biology. Marcus arrived on the bridge with the requested supplies, and Zara began preparing equipment that most of the crew had never seen before. Her movements were precise and efficient as she assembled what appeared to be a combination of medical devices and combat gear. The human body can be enhanced far beyond its normal limits, she explained as she worked. Combat drugs, neural stimulators, and specific medical procedures can temporarily increase strength, speed, and reaction time by factors that most species would consider impossible. She injected herself with a series of compounds, her hands never hesitating despite the obvious risks involved. These procedures are extremely dangerous and can only be sustained for short periods, but for approximately 30 minutes I'll be operating at superhuman levels. Commander Thane watched in fascination as Zara's pupils dilated and her movements became even more controlled and precise. Incredible. You're voluntarily inducing controlled combat enhancement. It's what SEALs do, Zara said simply. We push the human body beyond its limits to accomplish impossible missions. She turned to Captain Vorash. I need a shuttle and someone who can pilot it close enough to the hegemony ship for me to board. Once I'm aboard, I'll need exactly 12 minutes to reach their weapons control center. This is insane. Dr. Hesira's voice came over the communicator from the medical bay. The medical risks alone could kill you. Maybe, Zara acknowledged. But if I don't try, everyone on this ship dies anyway. Sometimes the only choice is between certain death and probable death. She moved to the shuttle bay access, her enhanced reflexes already making her movements seem almost inhuman. Captain, give me those 12 minutes. If I succeed, you'll have 2 fewer hegemony ships to worry about. If I fail? She shrugged. At least you'll know humanity doesn't go down without a fight. As she prepared to leave for what might be a suicide mission, Zara reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. Her carefully guarded secret was finally out, but in revealing it, she had discovered something she hadn't expected. The crew of the Galactic Unity didn't see her as a threat or a deception. They saw her as exactly what she had always been, a healer, willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The question now was whether one enhanced human could accomplish what an entire ship couldn't. Defeat 3 hegemony warships and save the lives of everyone depending on her skills. The enhanced combat drugs coursing through her system whispered that the answer was yes. Her training told her the mission was possible. Her heart told her it was necessary. Time to show the hegemony what humanity was really capable of. The shuttle Aurora streaked through space toward the lead hegemony warship, its pilot, Lieutenant Yaskar, pushing the small craft to its maximum speed while Zara prepared for what could only be described as an impossible mission. The Zilonian pilot's 3 arms worked the controls with practiced precision, weaving between enemy weapons fire with skill that impressed even Zara's enhanced reflexes. 30 seconds to insertion point. Yaskar called back. Are you sure about this, Lieutenant Commander? That ship has enough firepower to vaporize a city. Zara checked her equipment one final time. The combat enhancement drugs had reached full effectiveness, and she could feel her body operating at levels that would have been impossible without the medical modifications. Her reflexes were razor sharp, her strength nearly doubled, and her tactical awareness heightened to superhuman levels. I'm sure, she replied, moving to the shuttle's emergency airlock. Remember, once I'm aboard, you have exactly 12 minutes to get clear. Don't wait for me if things go wrong. Understood. Good hunting, Commander. The shuttle shuddered as it made contact with the hegemony ship's hull. Zara activated her magnetic clamps and emergency cutting torch, burning through the warship's outer armor with surgical precision. The hegemony crew wouldn't detect the breach for several minutes, long enough for her to get inside and begin her mission. She dropped through the hull breach into a maintenance corridor, her enhanced senses immediately analyzing the environment. The ship's layout was exactly as her military briefings had described, typical hegemony design with redundant systems and heavy armor. What the briefings hadn't mentioned was the smell, a mixture of ozone, metal, and something else that her medical training identified as pheromone markers used by the hegemony to coordinate their troops. Moving through the corridors with inhuman speed and silence, Zara avoided the patrol routes she had memorized during her intelligence briefings. The hegemony crew had no idea they had been boarded, and she intended to keep it that way until it was too late for them to respond. Her first objective was the ship's medical bay. Not to treat patients, but to acquire something that would make the rest of her mission possible. The hegemony's own enhancement drugs designed for their physiology, but adaptable by someone with her knowledge of xenobiology. She reached the medical bay without encountering any crew members, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to move faster than their security sensors could track. Inside, she found exactly what she needed: combat stimulants designed to increase hegemony aggression and pain tolerance. With her medical expertise, she could modify these drugs to work on human physiology, while adding a few interesting side effects. Working with superhuman speed and precision, Zara synthesized a new compound that would not only enhance her already boosted capabilities, but would also make her nearly invisible to hegemony bioscanners. The drug cocktail was dangerous, potentially lethal, but it would give her the edge she needed for the next phase of her mission. As the new enhancement took effect, Zara felt her awareness expand even further. She could hear conversations 3 decks away, smell the distinct pheromone signatures of individual crew members, and process tactical information at a rate that bordered on precognitive. Her communicator chirped softly with an encrypted message from the Galactic Unity. "Status report, Commander. Our shields are down to 8%. Proceeding to weapons control," she replied. 5 minutes remaining. The weapons control center was located in the heart of the ship, protected by multiple security layers and patrolled by the hegemony's elite soldiers. Under normal circumstances, it would be impossible for a single person to penetrate such defenses. But Zara was no longer operating under normal circumstances. She encountered her first patrol 2 decks from her objective. 3 hegemony soldiers, each nearly 7 feet tall and armed with plasma rifles. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered anything that could threaten them. They were wrong. Zara struck from the shadows with speed that made her movements appear as nothing more than blurs of motion. Her enhanced strength, combined with precise knowledge of hegemony anatomy, allowed her to incapacitate all 3 soldiers in seconds. They never had a chance to raise an alarm or even understand what had happened to them. Moving deeper into the ship, she used her medical knowledge in ways that her instructors had never intended. Pressure points that would cause temporary paralysis, nerve clusters that would induce unconsciousness, and pheromone disruption techniques that would make the remaining crew disoriented and confused. The weapons control center loomed ahead, its massive armored doors guarded by 2 more elite soldiers. Zara could hear the conversations inside. 16 crew members coordinating the attack on the Galactic Unity. In 3 minutes, they would fire a concentrated barrage that would completely destroy the research vessel. She had to act now. The guards at the door never saw her coming. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to move faster than their nervous systems could process, and her medical knowledge told her exactly how to disable them without causing permanent harm. The hegemony might be the enemy, but they were still living beings, and her oath as a healer remained intact even in combat. The weapons control center's doors were designed to withstand assault by heavy weapons. They weren't designed to resist someone with intimate knowledge of their locking mechanisms and the tools to exploit their weaknesses. Zara's cutting torch made quick work of the security systems, and she was inside before anyone realized the outer defenses had been breached. "What the?" began one of the weapons officers, But his words were cut short as Zara moved through the control center like a force of nature. Her enhanced speed and precision allowed her to incapacitate the entire crew in less than 30 seconds, using medical techniques that left them unconscious but unharmed. Now came the critical moment. Zara's fingers flew over the weapons control systems, her enhanced cognition allowing her to process the complex hegemony interface at superhuman speed. She had studied these systems during her military service, but operating them under combat conditions while enhanced by alien drugs was an entirely different challenge. Galactic Unity. This is Commander Chen, she transmitted. I have control of the lead ship's weapons. Take evasive action and prepare for friendly fire on the remaining hegemony vessels. Understood, Commander. We're moving to safe distance. Zara turned the ship's massive weapons array toward its sister vessels. The other hegemony ships, still focused on their attack on the research vessel, had no idea that their lead ship had been compromised. They were positioned perfectly for what she had in mind. The first salvo of plasma torpedoes struck the second hegemony ship before its crew could react. The concentrated firepower, designed to destroy heavily armored targets, tore through the warship's shields and hull like paper. The vessel erupted in a brilliant flash of light as its reactor core went critical. The third ship began evasive maneuvers immediately, but Zara had anticipated their response. Her enhanced tactical awareness allowed her to predict their movements, and her second salvo caught them during a vulnerable maneuver. The ship didn't explode. Instead, its main systems went offline, leaving it drifting helplessly in space. 2 down, 1 disabled, she reported to the Galactic Unity. Mission accomplished. But even as she spoke, alarms began blaring throughout the hegemony ship. The crew was finally responding to the breach, and she could hear armed soldiers converging on her position. The enhancement drugs were also beginning to wear off, and she could feel her superhuman abilities starting to fade. Commander, came Captain Vorash's voice over her communicator. Can you reach the extraction point? Zara looked at the tactical display, calculating distances and response times with her still enhanced cognition. The soldiers would reach her position in less than 2 minutes, and it would take at least 3 minutes to fight her way back to the hull breach where Lieutenant Yaskar was waiting. Negative, she replied calmly. I'm trapped here. Get the Galactic Unity to safety and make sure the survivors reach their destination. Absolutely not, came an unexpected voice over the channel. It was Marcus. Commander, there's something you need to know. I'm not just a petty officer. I'm Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Earth Intelligence, and I've been covering your 6 for 3 years. Before Zara could process this revelation, she heard the sounds of weapons fire in the corridor outside. Someone was fighting the hegemony soldiers, buying her precious time. Marcus, what are you doing? My job, came his reply, punctuated by the sound of plasma fire. Protecting Earth's most valuable special operations medic. Now move, Commander. That's an order from someone who outranks you in the intelligence community. With her enhanced reflexes fading but still functional, Zara fought her way through the ship toward the extraction point. She could hear Marcus engaging multiple enemies, his own enhanced combat abilities clearly far beyond what any petty officer should possess. She reached the hull breach just as Lieutenant Yaskar's shuttle came into view. Behind her, the sounds of combat were growing closer, but Marcus's voice came over the communicator one last time. Tell them what humanity is capable of, he said. Show them that we don't just heal. We protect those who can't protect themselves. As the shuttle pulled away from their hegemony ship, Zara watched through the viewport as internal explosions began tearing the vessel apart. Marcus had apparently decided that ensuring the enemy ship couldn't pursue was worth the ultimate sacrifice. But as they approached the Galactic Unity, her enhanced hearing picked up a faint transmission on an emergency frequency. This is Lieutenant Webb requesting pickup. 1 to beam up, he had made it out. Somehow the intelligence operative who had been watching over her for 3 years had completed an impossible extraction from an exploding enemy ship. As the shuttle docked with the research vessel, Zara reflected on what had just happened. Her secret was completely exposed now, but instead of fear or suspicion, she had found acceptance and support from beings across the galaxy. More importantly, she had discovered that humanity's reputation for impossible heroics was well earned and shared by others who understood the value of standing up for what was right. The medical bay was waiting for her return, filled with patients who needed her skills and colleagues who had learned to see past her deception to the healer underneath. Dr. Hesira approached as she disembarked, her expression filled with newfound respect. "Commander," the Valorian physician said formally, "it would be an honor to serve under your command." Zara looked around the medical bay at the faces of beings from dozens of different species, all united in their commitment to preserving life and protecting the innocent. This was what the galaxy could be when different worlds worked together, and it was worth fighting for. "The honor is mine, Doctor," she replied. "Now let's get back to work. We have patients to heal." As the Galactic Unity resumed course for the outer colonies, carrying its precious cargo of survivors to safety, Zara Chen, no longer hiding behind a false identity, prepared to continue the work she had always been meant to do, healing the wounded, protecting the innocent, and showing the galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon had always been its unwavering commitment to the value of life. The hegemony had learned a valuable lesson that day. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the biggest weapons, but the one who refuses to let others suffer while they have the power to act. And in a galaxy full of warriors and weapons, that made humanity's healer warriors the most formidable force of all.